Opelousas, Louisiana, May the 20th, 1988. A small town on the edge of the bayou where everybody knows everybody, where families share meals and porch conversations and the kind of slow, familiar life that makes you believe nothing truly terrible could ever happen here. Opelousas used to be a very good place to live. Officers who worked the streets in the late 70s and early 80s will tell you they enjoyed the people, enjoyed the work, and rarely dealt with anything worse than petty trouble. But things were starting to change, and on this spring night, as a violent thunderstorm sweeps across St. Landry Parish, something terrible is about to happen. By the time the truth finally emerges 24 years later, it will have consumed lives, broken families, and tested the limits of a sister's love. The following account is based on official police records, court documents, forensic reports, and the testimony of those who lived through it. Some of these voices have never been heard publicly until now. 29-year-old Brenda DuPont rents a small efficiency apartment behind her older sister Linda's home near the intersection of Church and Railroad Streets. It's a modest place, one bedroom, a kitchen, the kind of home that fits a woman who is rebuilding her life one careful step at a time. Brenda is the youngest girl in a family of 12 children, 6 boys and 6 girls, raised by a sharecropper father who fed his family catfish from the bayou, and a mother who made sure every last one of them went to church. They grew up poor, in a little country town, but they grew up loved.
I would have done anything for my little sister Brenda. We all had a share in spoiling Brenda. We call it in French, and gâteau chaud. She was my little hot cake. I spoiled her a lot. But Mom and Dad made sure we went to church. We had catechism once a week, like on Saturday mornings.
The family was poor, deeply poor, like so many families from this part of the state. The kids had to miss the first 6 weeks of school every year to help their daddy harvest crops. But what they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in closeness. Those who knew the Bergerons described them as a very, very loving family.
They were raised in a little country town on a bayou. Very poor people, like many families are from this area. Her dad fed his family catfish from Bayou Teche, and they lived a very, very loving life in that family.
They were bound together by faith, by routine, by the kind of loyalty that only grows in hard soil. Brenda didn't care much for dressing up. She preferred her jeans, her little tank tops, the kind of clothes that let you move easy and laugh easy. But her parents always insisted she look proper for church. Catechism on Saturday mornings, Sunday services without fail. Their mother and father made sure of it, and Brenda went along, even if she grumbled about the dress code. It was a life built on faith and family, and Brenda carried both of those things with her everywhere she went. When Brenda was 18, she gave birth to a daughter named Monica.
I do believe she was a little bit nervous when she found out she was pregnant because she was young, but Brenda was a very good mother.
She started dating when her mother and father let her go, and she married the young man she was in love with, and that didn't last very long.
She eventually married the young man she was in love with, a man named Jerry, but the marriage didn't last.
So she had no income. Brenda was really depressed then. That's when the CPS got involved. And then that's how she lost custody of Monica.
Jerry left Brenda for another woman, and the breakup hit her hard. Suddenly she had no income, no stability. Depression set in, and when Child Protective Services got involved, Brenda lost custody of Monica.
Brenda was depressed after they took Monica away from her.
And they told her, the only way you get Monica back is for you to do what the doctors tell you to do, Brenda. She started taking her medications, and she was abiding by it. Brenda moved next door to me, and she was getting on her feet. Brenda would do what she had to do to get her daughter. Brenda was doing very well.
On the morning of May 20th, Brenda came to Linda's house with her usual energy. Linda was graduating, earning her GED, and Brenda arrived early to help prepare for the little celebration afterward.
On the morning of May 20th, Brenda came to my house. I was graduating, getting my GED, and Brenda came and started helping me make finger foods, cookies, sandwiches and stuff for the little party after my graduation. And Brenda stayed at my house until, I'm sure about 8:30 or 9 o'clock that night. And then it started raining real hard, lightning. The lightning was so bright you would think it was sunshine outside. It was raining really hard. Brenda went back to her apartment. She said she was going to go in for the night.
Linda watched her walk across the yard, through the rain, and disappear inside. It was the last time she would see Brenda alive.
I used to drink coffee with Brenda every morning. And the next morning, I sent Lee Herbert, my son, to go get Brenda to come eat breakfast. But Brenda didn't answer the door. And then finally, after about the third or fourth time, I went to my landlord's house and asked her if I could use her phone to call the police because I knew something was wrong. Brenda would have let us in by now.
She went to her landlord's house and asked to use the phone to call the police. When officers arrived, they found the front door locked.
The first officer that arrived on the scene observed a window in the back that was open. And when she looked through the window, from her vantage point, she observed Brenda's body.
The officer kicked the front door in. Inside, the mattress was slanted against the bed frame, and Brenda lay on the floor in a fetal position.
When the policewoman kicked the door in, I saw the mattress was kind of slanted against the bed frame, and I saw Brenda's body in a fetal position. Her eyes were open, but I knew she wasn't alive. When I saw Brenda's body on the floor, and I saw all the blood, I started screaming. And it was hard because I had to call my family and tell them that Brenda was gone. It was really hard.
Imagine making that phone call. Imagine dialing the number of your mother, your brothers and sisters, and telling them that the baby of the family, the one everyone spoiled, the one everyone loved had been murdered in the night while a thunderstorm raged outside. Brenda DuPont, 29 years old, the baby girl of the Bergeron family, was dead, and the nightmare was only beginning. Opelousas police videotaped the gruesome scene inside Brenda's apartment.
Going into the crime scene and observing Brenda's body lying there, it was an overkill. It was blood everywhere. It was an efficiency home that Brenda lived in. It was a one bedroom kitchen. The thing that stood out to me was the multiple stab wounds and the bite marks. That in particular stood out to me. She had no clothes on. That struck out to me that we would have to request sexual assault kit be administered during the autopsy. I was perplexed and angry at the same time. Angry because who in the world would do this to Brenda?
Investigators combed through the apartment searching for any weapon, anything the suspect might have left behind. They found nothing. No knife, no tool, no object that could have caused the 31 stab wounds the medical examiner would later count.
When we were going through the crime scene, we were looking for any possible weapons, anything that the suspect could have left behind at that crime scene. We found no weapons in Brenda's house that could have caused this, or that was even linked to this. You don't enter a person's house and then leave out the window. You come out the same door that they let you in. The theory at the beginning of Brenda's murder was that whoever killed her, she let him in. She knew him because the door was locked.
Another officer who arrived that morning, a patrolman who knew Brenda and her family personally, remembered passing by the scene and seeing the crowd that had already gathered.
I was working as a patrolman on that particular day. I knew Brenda lived at that residence. I knew Linda, her sister. I knew all of the people that lived in the house. This wasn't a big city at the time. I remember I passed by the crime scene. There was a lot of people out there.
This wasn't a big city. People knew each other. When word spread that something had happened at the house on Church and Railroad, people came. They stood in the street, and they stared and they whispered, and the fear began to spread like a stain. Because if this could happen to Brenda DuPont, quiet, easygoing Brenda who didn't bother anybody, it could happen to anyone. The investigation moved fast. Detectives focused on the people living closest to Brenda, her sister Linda, and Linda's boyfriend, Diker Chavis.
They started questioning me. They had so many questions. They were asking, who do you think did it? Did you have anything to do with it? Why would I kill my little sister? I was angry with the police because they were looking directly at us. Nobody in my house did this. So if y'all want to find the true murderer, go out and find the true murderer.
Both Linda and Diker had the same explanation for why they heard nothing: the thunderstorm. The rain had been torrential, the lightning blinding, the thunder constant.
The chief of police at the time summoned the entire investigative division into going into canvassing the area. Sometimes people don't want to come forward right away. People see things that they don't think are important to investigators. A canvass is done to hopefully seek out someone who has information relative to the crime. But the initial canvass on that day revealed no new information relative to Brenda's death. It was extremely rare for this kind of murder, something like we had never seen before. We were at a loss. This was brutal.
Linda voluntarily traveled to Baton Rouge and took a polygraph test. She passed. Diker Chavis was questioned extensively as well. Meanwhile, detectives discovered that Brenda had been dating two different men, both named David, at the same time. The question became obvious. Had one David found out about the other? Was this a revenge killing? Both men were brought in and interviewed. Their alibis were checked. They were cleared. Then detectives turned to Brenda's estranged husband, Jerry.
After he found out Brenda was murdered, he never came around. My mom even offered him to be a pallbearer. He said yes, and he didn't show up. But you don't come to your own wife's funeral. Come on now. We thought Jerry could be involved in it because, he didn't want her anymore. He put her and her little girl out, and he left Brenda for another woman.
Just a few weeks before she got killed, she had gone and met up with that woman that her husband Jerry was messing with. They got into an argument. And the lady was bigger than her, but Brenda did not back down. We mentioned everything to the cops. We told them about that.
And there was something else that troubled the family. Jerry never came to Brenda's funeral. Linda's mother even offered him a spot as a pallbearer. He agreed, then didn't show. But when police checked Jerry and his girlfriend's alibis, they held up. Both were cleared.
Well, we're always going to pick up and talk to the estranged person. We have to rule him out as a suspect. Detectives contact their estranged spouse to see if it was a revenge killing, and to see if there was any culpability.
They did question Jerry thoroughly about what happened that night when Brenda and that woman got into an argument.
Before the investigation could go further, the family had to bury Brenda. The funeral was a devastating affair. Because of the severity of her injuries, only immediate family was allowed to view the body. Linda donated her own plot in the cemetery so Brenda could be laid to rest. Their little brother crafted a beautiful headstone by hand. The family chose to bury her with her maiden name Bergeron, the name of the family that had raised her, not the husband who had abandoned her.
It was only the immediate family could view her body because it was so badly messed up. And when I went to her casket, I told her, Brenda, before I die, I'm going to solve this murder. And I meant that.
The chief of police ordered the entire investigative division into a full canvass of the neighborhood. Officers went door to door, hoping someone had seen something, heard something, anything.
We interviewed, had to be hundreds of people. It was an exhaustive list of people that were interviewed.
We got to that point where we just couldn't do any more with it until the case evolved. And I always say about this case is this is a case that the evidence had to wait for the technology to catch up with it.
It was very, very frustrating because we kept running into dead ends.
While detectives worked the human side of the investigation, forensic scientists at the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab were processing the physical evidence. Over 75 items had been submitted from Brenda's apartment. Among them was a sexual assault kit, and what it revealed confirmed the worst.
I first became familiar with the Brenda DuPont case when I was working at the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab in 1988. There were over 75 items of evidence that were submitted to the Louisiana State Police Lab. I was able to look at the items from the sexual assault kit, such as the vaginal washings and the vaginal swabs. We were able to identify seminal fluid and actually visually identified spermatozoa. So we knew that there was a sexual element involved to the case.
Investigators now had the killer's DNA, but in 1988, that meant almost nothing.
Well, back in 1988, forensic DNA analysis was in its infancy. It just wasn't as precise and accurate and as widely available as we needed. There weren't really any workable databases back then to compare things to.
The most crucial piece of evidence in the case would have to sit in a crime lab freezer and wait for science to catch up with a killer. The autopsy painted a horrifying picture. The coroner documented 31 stab wounds and bite marks on Brenda's body. The sheer number of wounds, the sexual assault, the bite marks, it all pointed in one direction. This was a crime of passion, committed by someone who knew Brenda, someone consumed by rage or obsession or both. Then, while police were still working Brenda's case, another act of violence shook Opelousas.
We had a report of a shooting approximately 3 or 4 city blocks from Brenda's homicide.
A lot of people were concerned because it was a pretty shocking thing for them to know that something like this had happened in the city.
Because of the proximity of the crimes, we thought that it could be our guy.
Because of how close the crimes were geographically, investigators immediately wondered, could Thompson be their man? His case had some similarities to Brenda's crime.
He was chasing a female into a home, apparently to hurt her. There was an individual, a man who was at the home and shot and killed him.
His case had some similarities to Brenda's crime because he was trying to get into a house. There was a lady there. We thought that, hey, that was the big break. This was it. It was very, very urgent. Either we have our man who committed this horrible crime at Brenda's house, or we still have a killer out on the loose.
Detective Victorian turned to a cutting-edge forensic technique, forensic odontology, bite mark analysis. At the time, it was touted by experts as being almost as good as fingerprints. The marks on Brenda's breast were so clearly defined that investigators had excellent photographs, shot to scale.
Forensic odontology, what's called pattern matching, was touted as being almost as good as fingerprints by a lot of their experts.
They knew that there was bite marks on one of Brenda's breasts.
The marks were so identifiable on her that, we had good pictures to scale, and we were gonna solve this case. My partner and I at the time went to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where we met with a forensic odontologist there who was sort of world-renowned. He had a reputation. I remember my partner and I sitting down with this pathologist. After talking to him, I was just confident that the bite mark was going to bring us to where we needed to be.
Victorian also made contact with a second forensic odontologist stationed at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. This expert offered to examine the evidence personally if Victorian could get to him. Victorian didn't hesitate. He boarded the next flight out, carrying the dental exemplars with him to the FBI Academy. The urgency was palpable. Every day that passed was a day the killer walked free. The coroner had obtained dental impressions from Clint Thompson's body, the exemplars they needed to compare against the bite marks. But Victorian wasn't just testing Thompson. He also submitted dental samples from Diker Chavis, Linda's boyfriend, who was still lingering on the periphery of suspicion.
The exemplars the forensic odontologist examined definitely ruled out Diker Ray Chavis as a suspect. However, Clint Thompson's exemplars bared some similarities. I was confident on my way back after obtaining that information. I was hopeful that we had our suspect.
Victorian was cautiously optimistic, but Thompson was already dead. They couldn't interview him, couldn't press him, couldn't put him in a room and watch him sweat.
If this man would have been alive, we'd make an arrest on him, and you put him in jail.
Certainly you can't talk to him, you can't interview him. There were things we would like to have known, a lot of unanswered questions.
The chief of police typed up a statement that there was a similarity to the bite marks and sent it to the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab.
Once we had learned that back in 1989 that that a bite mark had been identified, we'd considered the case solved based on the information we had at the time.
So, most of the people are not even looking at it again.
But Linda wasn't buying it. She didn't know Clint Thompson, and something in her gut told her he wasn't the one.
when the police came home and mentioned Clint Thompson may have done this to Brenda, I didn't go for it. I didn't know Clint Thompson, but I don't think Clint Thompson did this to Brenda.
Her instincts proved right. When the forensic pathologist took a closer look at the dental evidence, he reached a different conclusion. Clint Thompson could not have left those bite marks on Brenda. The similarities were superficial. The match was not a match at all. Investigators were right back to square one.
I felt frustrated. It was sad because we couldn't put our hands on the suspect.
City court granted Linda custody, and she raised Monica with all the love she had, but the wound was too deep.
City court gave me custody of Brenda's daughter, and it was hard because Monica's only thing was, who killed my mama? And we couldn't answer that. We couldn't answer it. What do you tell her?
The only thing Monica ever wanted to know was who killed her mama, and for 24 years, no one could answer that question. The silence ate away at her. As she grew older, the pain didn't diminish. It metastasized.
It was hard to see that child not being raised by her mother. Linda loved her dearly and did everything she could for the child, but we could tell the child longed for her mother.
Monica wouldn't stay home. She got to drinking. She started drugging. She wasn't taking good care of herself. She had friends that didn't care about her.
Eventually, Monica moved to Georgia, trying to start over. But how do you start over when the wound at the center of your life has never been closed? When the question that defined your childhood, who killed my mama, still has no answer? In 1995, 7 years after the murder, Detective Victorian left the Opelousas Police Department. The case still weighed on him.
Leaving the department and the suspect is still running around, it certainly frustrates you. And you think about, did we miss out on anything? Did we leave something behind? Having to pass in front of that house, or pass in that area at different times certainly triggered certain emotions.
The case was technically still open, but it might as well have been sealed in a tomb. The leads had vanished like a flash of lightning in the Louisiana night, and the file gathered dust. Years turned into decades. Officers who had worked the case retired or moved on. Witnesses' memories faded. The apartment where Brenda died changed hands. The neighborhood itself changed. Opelousas, which had once been a place where you didn't have many homicides, grew rougher as the years went on, but Brenda's case remained frozen in time, a wound the town could never quite heal. But Linda refused to let Brenda be forgotten. She kept photographs of her sister on the piano in her den, on a bookshelf, where she could see them every day. And she remembered the vow she'd made over Brenda's casket.
I keep Brenda's pictures in my den on the piano, and I have some on a bookshelf, and just remember things that she and I did together. I said, Brenda, I promised you I was going to solve this case.
In 2006, a man who had spent 28 years with the Louisiana State Police was elected sheriff of St. Landry Parish. He knew Linda, he knew the case, and when he took office, Linda was one of the first people he heard from.
I decided to run a campaign for the elected position of chief of police. And during the course of that campaigning, I came across family members who expressed an interest in solving cases that had gone dormant or cold. And one family in particular was Linda, who asked me to please have someone look into her sister's case. And I assured her that I would.
In 2012, 24 years after Brenda's murder, the Opelousas Police Department launched a new cold case unit, and Gallo knew exactly who should lead it.
I knew the perfect person to look at these cases, and that individual, of course, was Dwayne Grimmett. It's safe to say that there are certain investigators who have a better working relationships with crime labs, and Dwayne Grimmett is one of those guys.
When you start working a case like this, you have to make sure that you have everything that either the crime lab has or that your office has, or they kept it. There was a lot of paperwork that I had to regenerate as far as getting it from the crime lab, or witnesses. You had to find the witnesses and talk to them and get statements from them again.
It was obviously to us through experience that the person that did this knew Brenda because of the violence that took place inside the home.
Asked Calloway, Grimmett began by doing what any good cold case investigator does. He went back to the beginning. He pulled every file, every piece of paper, every tape. A lot of the original documentation had to be regenerated, obtained again from the crime lab, from witnesses who had to be tracked down years later and asked to provide fresh statements. It was painstaking, tedious work. Some witnesses had moved, some had died. Memories that were sharp in 1988 had grown hazy after nearly a quarter century. But Grimmett understood something the original investigators had always known. The person who killed Brenda knew her. The violence inside that apartment was too personal, too explosive, too intimate to have come from a stranger. This was a crime of rage, of obsession. Whoever did this to Brenda had feelings about her, dark, twisted feelings that culminated in an act of breathtaking cruelty. Grimmett even brought in Diker Chavis for another interview, trying to shake loose any detail that might have been missed. And during that conversation, Chavis mentioned a name that had come up early in the original investigation, a boyfriend of Brenda's.
And I heard he confessed on the time period that he did that.
Chavis told Grimmett that people in the neighborhood believed this man had confessed, but when Grimmett followed up, he discovered the man was dead, another lead that died before it could be pursued. But Grimmett had one advantage that Detective Victorian never had: 24 years of advances in forensic science. The DNA evidence collected in 1988, the vaginal swabs from Brenda's sexual assault kit, had been preserved all those years. In 1988, the technology couldn't do anything meaningful with them. By 2012, it could. Grimmett asked a forensic analyst named George to run the old swabs through modern testing. The results weren't perfect. They recovered 12 of the 16 genetic markers typically analyzed, but it was enough to create a usable profile, enough to enter it into CODIS, the national DNA database. So he ran it. When George called Grimmett with the name Jonelle Rubin, Grimmett's jaw dropped. The name didn't mean anything to the crime lab analyst, but to Grimmett, it meant everything. Grimmett immediately went to the evidence room and began searching. In Brenda's case file, he found a bag of 8mm tapes, the original interview recordings from 1988. He started going through them, and the very first person he came across was John L. Rubin, Jonelle Rubin, the same man, 34. Rubin had been 18 years old when Brenda was killed. Police had questioned him at the time because he had a connection to Linda's children. He was known in the neighborhood. And when Grimmett listened to those old tapes, one detail leaped out. Rubin had scratches on his neck. In a case where the victim had been stabbed 31 times and had defensive wounds, scratches on a suspect's neck were significant.
Did you get the scratches in your neck?
Girlfriend did that.
Stephanie?
But when police asked Rubin about the marks in 1988, he claimed his girlfriend, a woman named Stephanie, had scratched him during an argument. Investigators at the time apparently never verified that story. They never found a tape of Stephanie's interview. The lead had simply been dropped. Grimmett tracked down Stephanie Keys and brought her in. He asked her directly, did she scratch Rubin on the neck back in '88?
Would you remember if you and him would have scratched him or cut him in anywhere around the neck or with your fingernails maybe?
I honestly can't remember.
Her answer was devastating in its honesty. She couldn't remember. She could neither confirm nor deny the alibi Rubin had used to explain away the most incriminating physical evidence against him. Then Grimmett spoke to Linda, who provided a statement that sent chills through the investigation. She remembered that John L. Rubin had been at her home the night before Brenda was killed, and she remembered something else, something she had told police at the time, but that had seemingly gone nowhere. Rubin had been playing with a knife.
He had pulled a little knife out, and we made him leave because I don't believe my baby was just 4 years old, and I don't play that. They come for trouble, I run their ass.
Fate handed Grimmett an opportunity. John L. Rubin was arrested on a domestic abuse charge and was sitting in the local jail. Grimmett sat across from Rubin in a small interview room, knowing he held a card Rubin didn't expect, a DNA match from a vaginal swab taken 24 years earlier. But Grimmett didn't play that card right away. He started by asking Rubin about his relationship with Brenda, probing for admissions, watching for tells. Rubin's body language was guarded from the start. To strengthen the case, Grimmett needed a second DNA test. The original hit had come from a sample Rubin had provided in Texas during a separate case. They obtained one, and they ran it. The second test confirmed what the first had revealed. The DNA found inside Brenda DuPont's body belonged to Jonelle Rubin. Grimmett went to a judge, presented his evidence, and the judge found probable cause to sign an arrest warrant. Jonelle Rubin was charged with first-degree murder and aggravated rape in the death of Brenda DuPont.
You actually charged him with this?
Yep.
What, murder?
Yep.
With the arrest made, investigators could now piece together what they believed had happened on the night of May 20th, 1988. John L. Rubin had been at Linda's house the evening before the murder. He'd been playing with a knife, alarming Linda enough that she threw him out. But Rubin knew the layout of the property. He knew Brenda lived in the small apartment behind Linda's home. He knew she was alone. Grimmett's theory, presented at trial, was that Rubin came through the back window on the south side of the house, possibly using a ladder, and surprised Brenda. He sexually assaulted her. He stabbed her dozens of times, probably with the knife he had been carrying the night before, and then he escaped out the window, leaving Brenda's front door locked behind him. Jonelle Rubin's trial began with the weight of 24 years behind it. He faced charges of first-degree murder and aggravated rape. The prosecution laid out its case methodically. On January 27, 2016, the jury retired to deliberate. 2 hours later, they returned. Guilty. First-degree murder. A newspaper photographer captured the moment, tears streaming down the face of a man who had believed, for 24 years, that he had gotten away with murder. 22 days after the guilty verdict, a judge sentenced Jonelle Rubin to life in prison. He would never walk free again. Just 2 months after Rubin was sentenced, Brenda's daughter Monica passed away. She was 39 years old. The girl who had grown up asking who killed her mama, the girl who had spiraled into addiction and despair, the girl whose entire life had been shaped by an act of violence committed when she was 11, she was gone before she could truly heal. Brenda DuPont was 29 years old. She was a mother, a sister, a daughter, the youngest girl in a family of 12 who grew up on the bayou eating catfish and going to church. She was funny. She was easygoing. She didn't bother anybody. She deserved to raise her daughter, to grow old alongside her sister, to drink coffee on the porch every morning for the rest of her life. Instead, her life was stolen by a man she knew, a man who lived in her neighborhood, a man who crept through her window on a stormy night and took everything from her. This case reminds us that evil doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes it lives 3 doors down. Sometimes it smiles in your face and carries a knife in its pocket. And it reminds us of the power of love, not the soft, sentimental kind that fades with time, but the fierce, stubborn, unyielding kind. The kind that makes a woman call the police department year after year, chief after chief, election after election, refusing to accept that her sister's life doesn't matter. The kind that makes her stand at a graveside and make a promise she has no idea how to keep, and then spend 2 decades keeping it anyway. Linda made a promise over Brenda's casket in 1988. 24 years later, she kept it.